So, a pretty stunning claim came out of a House Homeland Security hearing recently. We're talking about something that points to a massive national security threat, and, as you can imagine, it has ignited a total firestorm of debate. We're going to break down the numbers, the alleged cause, and the controversy surrounding it, all based on the source material at the heart of this discussion. Let's dive right in.
It all starts with this one single, really startling number, 18,000. This is the figure that kicked everything off, and it was presented as a major security issue. But what does this number actually represent? Where does it come from?
Well, according to the source, this is the alleged number of individuals with ties to groups like ISIS and al-Qaeda who have entered the United States under the current administration. It's an incredibly powerful claim, and honestly, it's the foundation for this entire argument that we're about to unpack.
Okay, so to really get our heads around the scale of this allegation, we've got to break down the numbers. Let's take a look at the key figures the source uses to frame this whole issue.
The story as it's presented really begins here, with the over 100,000 Afghan evacuees who entered the U.S. after the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan.
Now, within that larger group of over 100,000 people, the source claims there are at least 2,000 individuals who are either known or suspected terrorists or at least have ties to them. This is a key piece of the larger allegation.
And just to put the administration's current enforcement efforts into some kind of perspective, the source points to this figure, 690,000. That's the total number of deportations in about a year. This number is being used to frame the scale of the broader immigration situation.
So how did this situation supposedly happen? Well, the source material draws a very direct line from a major foreign policy event to these current security concerns.
And that's the key question, right? What was the root cause? The explanation provided in the source traces it all back to a single, pivotal moment in recent history.
So here's the cause and effect story that's being laid out. It starts in the fall of 2021 with what the source calls the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. That event is then directly linked to what's described today as a heightened domestic threat, all because of alleged failures in the vetting process during that chaotic evacuation.
And really, the core of the argument comes down to this alleged procedural failure. The claim is that the vast majority of those 100,000-plus people were not vetted to the required standard, which they say created a significant security loophole.
So, given this alleged threat, what's the proposed solution? The source lays out a two-part strategy that's being pursued to mitigate the risk: deportation and a really comprehensive revetting operation. The plan of action is pretty straightforward. First, you actively identify the individuals inside the country who have these alleged ties to terrorist organizations. Then, step 2 is to work directly with DHS to have them deported.
And to underscore the sense of urgency here, the source highlights an acceleration in deportations. The numbers show a jump from a previous rate of about 600 per week to a current pace of about 1,000 per week.
But beyond just deportation, there's a massive revetting process that's now underway. We're talking about a multi-agency task force, the National Counterterrorism Center, the FBI, and DHS, with a mission to revet every single person from that evacuation. And the reason for this huge undertaking? According to the source, it's because the true number of improperly vetted individuals is still completely unknown.
This brings us to our final section, which highlights a conflict that isn't just about policy or numbers, but about the very words used to define the threat itself.
To understand this conflict, we need to focus on a specific, tragic event that becomes a real flashpoint in the debate: the gunning down of 2 National Guard members in the nation's capital. And right here, the disagreement is just stark. On one side, you have Representative Benny Thompson calling the event an unfortunate accident. On the other side, former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard describes it as a terrorist attack on our own soil. I mean, these are 2 completely different interpretations of the very same deadly incident. So why does the language matter so much? This quote from Gabbard argues that it points to a much larger issue: a refusal by some leaders to name what she calls this Islamist terrorist threat, which she believes prevents any kind of effective response. And that leaves us with a final provocative question at the heart of this entire debate. It's one that goes beyond this single incident to how we talk about national security itself. When does a word become a weapon?